Order of the day, resuming the adjourned debate on the amendment to the motion for the address in reply to the speech from the throne. I recognize the member from Philadelphia South and leader of this party.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est avec plaisir que je me lève pour agir au discours du trône de la deuxième session de la 59e législature de l'Assemblée législative du Nouveau-Brunswick. It is indeed a pleasure to rise to reply to the throne speech, the sequel, Mr. Speaker. I want to acknowledge that we meet on the unceded territory of the Wallacequa people and that our relationship is governed by treaties of peace and friendship, as it is with the Passamaquoddy and Mi'kmaq people, based on the rights and obligations that flow from these treaties to the beneficiaries as enshrined in the Constitution of Canada. This, in fact, must guide the relationship this government and this legislature has with Indigenous peoples, as must the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, to which, as a nation, we are a signatory. I note that in the throne speech, government intends to engage this legislature in defining a new relationship with First Nations. Now, like much of the carefully crafted language in the throne speech, this is open to some interpretation. We have a centuries-old legal and constitutional relationship that we have actually failed to respect, Mr. Speaker. So, by a new relationship, the question in my mind is, does the Premier mean he will govern in ways which respect Indigenous and treaty rights, guided by the articles of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, for example, or is somehow he looking to redefine that relationship? Le point de vue du Premier ministre sur seulement deux des articles de la Déclaration des Nations unies sur les droits des peuples autochtones révélerait la réponse à cette question de savoir ce qu'il entend faire. For example, in Article 19, we see that states shall consult and cooperate in good faith with Indigenous peoples, consulted through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect them. So that would be an interesting question to get an answer on at some point in the future. Similarly, just another example, Article 32 of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples says, states shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the Indigenous peoples concerned through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free and informed consent prior to the approval of any project affecting their lands or territories and other resources, particularly in connection with the development, utilization, or exploitation of mineral, water, or other resources. So, of course, immediately what comes to mind, Mr. Speaker, is the government's plan, not in the throne speech, but widely spoken about by the Premier and the media, the plan to lift, at least partially, the moratorium on shale gas exploitation in New Brunswick. I look forward to working in this House to establish and energize a legitimate and meaningful relationship that our treaties envisioned, working to safeguard Indigenous languages, to implement the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, and to establish the community control over land and resources by First Nations as committed in this throne speech. Mr. Speaker, in the coming year, we will celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Official Languages Act, unanimously adopted by this legislature on April 18, 1969. As we know, it set out that English and French are the two official languages of New Brunswick, and it recognized the fundamental right of New Brunswickers to receive services in the official language of their choice from the provincial government wherever they may be in this province. Ce que le Premier ministre Louis Robichaud avait annoncé, le Premier ministre Richard Hadfield l'a poursuivi en reconnaissant l'égalité des communautés linguistiques anglophones et francophones, puis par l'enchâssement des droits des deux communautés linguistiques dans la Charte canadienne des droits et libertés. As a result, Acadians and Francophones in New Brunswick have not been assimilated, living in the sea of English in North America as we do. Quite to the contrary, the French language is strong in New Brunswick, and Acadian culture is thriving. These achievements are to be celebrated in 2019, achievements in which all New Brunswickers can be proud. I look forward to the day when we can celebrate comparable achievements for the Indigenous peoples of our province, Mr. Speaker. Now, I know well that there are numbers of Anglophones who feel that unfairness has resulted from successive governments' efforts to ensure the equality of English and French linguistic communities, and will not perhaps be in the mood to celebrate or feel included in those commemorations. Mr. Speaker, this needs to be addressed head-on. It's not addressed in the throne speech, but we need to enter into these dialogues and these discussions to address these concerns, to bust myths and to address concerns that come forward that perhaps are quite legitimate, in particular examples where something has happened that reflects unfairness in government. I want to commend the Premier for his commitment in the throne speech to rebalance the relationship between the legislative and executive branches of government. For New Brunswick to progress, Mr. Speaker, the legislature must be able to exercise its authority, and private members must be able to exercise the agency they've been granted by their electorate, Mr. Speaker. So this is, if it comes to fruition, going to be a very important step forward for New Brunswick to help us get things done. I also want to acknowledge the importance of the Premier's commitment in the throne speech to empower the public service to do its job on behalf of New Brunswickers, and hopefully to create the working environment where public servants will feel emboldened to be creative risk takers in their work and to be confident that they can speak truth to power. This, too, is necessary for New Brunswick to progress. En élisant un gouvernement minoritaire, les gens du Nouveau-Brunswick nous ont offert une occasion en or d'unir nos efforts pour accomplir de grandes choses pour le Nouveau-Brunswick et pour les Néo-Brunswickoises et Néo-Brunswickois. Many point to the achievements of the Pearson-led minority governments from 1963 to 1968, which featured 4 parties in the House of Commons, Mr. Speaker, just as we have 4 parties in our Legislative Assembly here in New Brunswick. Over those years, the Royal Commission on the Status of Women and the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism were established, which led to real social progress being made in our country. And it was a Pearson-led minority government with all-party support, unanimous consent in the House, that instituted Medicare for all Canadians, and then instituted the Canadian Pension Plan for all Canadians. So I think it bears some examination, Mr. Speaker, given all the fine rhetoric in the House about cooperation and collaboration, about how that minority government, or those minority governments, over 2, I guess, were successful and were able to achieve so much for Canadians and for Canada. What was the secret of the success of that minority government, that minority parliament, and the work of those 4 parties in the House of Commons? There's got to be a template here, perhaps, for us to follow. Well, in doing a little research, Mr. Speaker, I found a 2009 article written by Tom Kent in Policy Options, and he identified 4 key elements, which I think would be instructive for us to consider and reflect on and pursue. 1, he said the minority government of the day came in with coherent objectives that it wanted to achieve for the country. 2, importantly, those objectives were in tune with the underlying public attitudes of the times. They reflected a great sensitivity to the great needs of the era in which they were pursued, Mr. Speaker. So there was tremendous resonance between the objectives of the minority government and the needs that the people of the country, that were heartfelt by the people of the country at that time. 3, it was genuinely a cabinet government, governed by cabinet, not by executive fiat, which brought together the rich talents of the cabinet of the day to discuss and debate and cooperate around all of the issues. No cabinet minister was forced to stick to their knitting, but was expected indeed, Mr. Speaker, to participate in the fullness of cabinet debate on each of the important issues of the day that the minority government was intending to bring forward. And interestingly enough, there was a minimum of ministerial and PMO staff in those days, giving the cabinet members perhaps greater latitude and more responsibility on their shoulders to engage and participate. So those minority governments actually worked by cooperation among cabinet members, not control from the top and not dictation from the top to deputy ministers. That would be quite an achievement if we got there, Mr. Speaker. The other thing that Mr. Kent points out in his article is that parliamentary success in those years of minority government and minority parliament was not the product of what this throne speech calls honorary compromise. No, sir, not at all, not even a little bit, or trade-offs, or anyone yielding their principles. Didn't happen. Rather, interestingly enough, Mr. Speaker, and importantly, parliamentary success in those minority governments resulted from finding common ground, Mr. Speaker. We found the common ground which all could work on, and that was fundamental in resulting in the great leaps forward, I'll say, that those minority parliaments were able to initiate in their time in the House of Commons. So, when I read the throne speech, what are the opportunities for common ground? I think that's what we need to look at and reflect on. Where is the common ground where we can make similar significant progress for New Brunswickers and New Brunswick? And there's considerable common ground, Mr. Speaker, as I reviewed the throne speech with some care. In health care, for example, reducing wait times, improving access to primary health care, creating more community health care centers, making greater use of nurse practitioners, pharmacists, and I would add midwives, Mr. Speaker, making mental health care a priority, improving access to that mental health care with a special focus on improving access and treatment for youth mental health or mental illness, and improving access to paramedics as well. All areas of common ground. Making public health a priority once again by restoring the integrity and independence of the Chief Medical Officer of Health and their office. Again, substantial common ground, Mr. Speaker. With respect to seniors, améliorer les soins aux personnes âgées en diminuant le nombre de lits d'hôpital occupés par des aînés simplement parce qu'ils n'ont pas où aller. Augmenter les salaires des personnes qui donnent des soins à domicile et encourager la création de nouvelles solutions de logement offre autant de possibilités de terrain d'entente et de collaboration. Absolument, Monsieur le Président. Plenty of common ground when it comes to addressing the needs of seniors in this province. What about poverty? Well, the throne speech commits to reworking social assistance programs, Mr. Speaker, and I think we all know that that needs to be done. Now, of course, the devil is in the detail, and it sort of depends on what this actually means in terms of how much common ground there is, but certainly the level of social assistance is inadequate. The myriad rules are punitive, as is the requirement or the prohibition on sharing accommodation to make one's money go longer, and the clawbacks that exist in so many ways that help people from getting ahead. Also, the throne speech in this regard talked about making it easier for the poor to address physical and mental health obstacles and addictions, and access to training. All important areas, Mr. Speaker, all important areas of common ground we can work on together. So, Mr. Speaker, I see common ground there. I am concerned that these commitments were framed up under the heading of an economy that includes everyone rather than a society that includes everyone, but perhaps we can broaden that out some. Why I'm concerned, Mr. Speaker, is because the throne speech seems to take the perspective that most people on social assistance are capable of attaching to the workforce, and that's just not the case. The majority of people living on income assistance will never be able to be part of the formal economy. But they could fully participate in the life of their communities. And that's where we need to get to, Mr. Speaker. It's impossible for that to happen now on the social assistance rates that they receive. So they do need to be increased. And it's impossible with the lack of affordable housing, Mr. Speaker. Most recently, evidenced by the significant increase in homelessness in our 3 major cities. This needs to be changed. But I know we can find common ground here as well. With respect to education, I see common ground too. The commitments to engage teachers and principals in determining what is needed to create the most effective learning environments for students, and to make that happen, I think there's tremendous common ground there, Madam Speaker. Focus on early literacy with a community schools-based program, again, common ground. Improve second language training across the boards to make conversational skills in that second language a universal expectation of all graduates from our public school system. A great goal, a great objective, common ground. The throne speech talks about reviewing the tuition tax credits and tuition rebate program. Perhaps there's common ground there. Certainly I have spoken over time repeatedly, and we made a commitment, in fact, in our platform to restore these programs. However, in doing so, Madam Speaker, it's important that the progress towards providing free access to all for post-secondary education must not be lost. Backsliding from providing it to those in need is unacceptable. We must continue to move towards the goal of eliminating tuition requirements for post-secondary education for all New Brunswickers. No backsliding, Madam Speaker, just moving forward. With respect to the environment, unfortunately, in the throne speech, it's thin gruel, so it's hard to see how much common ground there is. There's nothing that addresses the need to ensure we have water quality, fresh water quality standards, Madam Speaker. Nothing that addresses solid wastes, solid waste management, waste reduction, waste reuse, waste recycling. Nothing there. Nothing addressing plastics, Madam Speaker. There is just not much. But what there is, it looks like there could be common ground. Supporting environmentally sound management of natural resources like our forests, supporting environmental sound management of wildlife, perhaps there's common ground there. Meeting our carbon emission targets in New Brunswick's Climate Change Act, which is what it says in the throne speech, there's certainly common ground there. Not meeting artificially kind of trumped up targets transposed from the federal level to the provincial level, not common ground there. But increasing and growing the renewable energy capacity of the province as committed in the throne speech, absolutely. The recent United Nations IPCC climate report, Madam Speaker, leaves no doubt we've reached a fork in the road to respond to climate breakdown. So we've got to cut our fossil fuel use or pass on an inhospitable world to our children. It's as stark as that, Madam Speaker. So it makes me concerned that there is no sense of urgency in the throne speech around addressing this fundamental issue, and that it's not more, at least the commitments in the throne speech are not more robust. It almost treats climate action as something that is simply being foisted on us by the federal government rather than something that is being demanded by New Brunswickers and expected by New Brunswickers, rather than something that is our, in fact, moral duty to do. When you think about climate change, Madam Speaker, you think about intergenerational theft. The throne speech describes our fiscal debt this way, but Madam Speaker, that pales in comparison to the consequences of the ecological debt we're leaving our children. You may say, Madam Speaker, members may say here, Madam Speaker, that it can't be all that bad. As someone who has been immersed in this issue for 30 years, and as most climate scientists will tell you, it's worse. Much, much worse, Madam Speaker. Perhaps those who have been working in the field on this issue in New Brunswick and elsewhere for a long time have been pulling their punches a bit too much, not to alarm people, not to make people fearful. But the scientific consensus in the IPCC report says we have 12 years to achieve the goal of the Paris Agreement, 12 years to turn things around, 12 years to make the energy transition substantially away from fossil fuels to renewables. And that means launching the energy transition from fossil fuels to renewables now. It is no longer tenable to suggest we can substitute one fossil fuel for another as a stepping stone to the future and avoid the devastating consequences of a significantly hotter world, as the Premier did just the other day in suggesting that somehow we can go from one fossil fuel to frack natural gas as a step in the direction to making the energy transition. 30 years ago, 25 years ago, might have been something one could say. Today, no time left, Madam Speaker. So what do we do? What would this throne speech have, if it was more robust and took this issue more seriously, have said? Well, stamp out energy waste now, put our trades to work upgrading homes and commercial buildings across the province to reduce their energy use, which of course reduces carbon pollution. Put our builders to work building new net zero energy homes rather than the net energy consuming homes we have today. And our builders are doing that, ready to do that now, Madam Speaker. The New Brunswick Home Builders Association has an incredible training program to train our builders and our trades to do just that. We could lead the country in this, Madam Speaker, with the right policy environment in place and extend that approach to home building, to home renovations, so that an increasing proportion of our existing homes could be net zero energy homes as well, Madam Speaker. The potential is tremendous. The job creation potential is stupendous, Madam Speaker. We have put our designers, our engineers, our manufacturers, our contractors and trades to work, substituting energy efficiency for energy waste in our homes, in commercial buildings and industrial buildings. We have put our designers, engineers, manufacturers, contractors, and tradespeople to work substituting renewable energy for fossil energy to keep us warm in our homes and in our buildings, to power our electrical grid, and to move us around. People and small businesses need our help to upgrade their homes and buildings now, to replace fossil-fueled heating systems, to access transportation alternatives to driving, to electrify transportation, and to secure that electricity from a completely renewably powered electricity grid. Tous ces efforts et toutes ces innovations en matière d'énergie ont besoin à la base d'une politique publique audacieuse, d'une nouvelle réglementation dans l'intérêt du public, de financement et d'un organisme responsable de coordonner et de surveiller cette transition énergétique. It means saying yes to growing renewable energy production and no to growing fossil fuel production. It's a clear choice. Increases to local fossil fuel production only increases our contribution to the global loading of carbon in the atmosphere, imposing those costs on everyone. On everyone. There's no bubble over Sussex, Madam Speaker. The emissions go into the atmosphere that we all share, the global commons. This is the problem, Madam Speaker. We all have a responsibility to protect the global commons. every time any one of us, any province or municipality or state or country fails to take its responsibility seriously in protecting the global commons, it spells disaster for all. We don't need pipelines snaking their way across this country. What we need, actually, Madam Speaker, is a national transmission line to ensure renewable power sources can be shared by all Canadians, from areas that are rich in renewable energy resources to those that are not so rich in renewable energy resources. Regions rich in hydro, solar power, wind power, and tidal power can then share with those that are not. That's a nation-building project, and one where there's a real imperative to act. The energy transition responds to one of our greatest needs. The alternative is to carry on as we are, stealing the quality of life we enjoy from our children and our grandchildren. As political leaders, Madam Speaker, the choice is actually ours to make. It's not something we can leave for the youth of today. It's on us, and they're counting on us. We can't let them down, Madam Speaker. Some members of this House may think, well, we've got time. Madam Speaker, the time has run out. We've got to act now. Does this represent common ground, Madam Speaker? Well, we'll see in the days to come. Certainly, in the Throne speech with regards to economic development, I see some grounds for common ground. L'idée de passer d'une économie subventionnée à une économie verte, créatrice d'emplois, de rallier tout le monde, peu importe l'allégeance politique. The biggest potential to create those green economy jobs, in fact, Madam Speaker, is in vigorously pursuing the energy transition I just spoke about. They exist as well in moving towards a zero-waste New Brunswick. But as I mentioned, I see nothing in the Throne speech about that. They also exist in diversifying our forest economy, which depends on changing our approach to forest management to one that is ecologically and community-based, so that we will have a diverse forest, a vibrant rural economy, and resilient rural communities. Pour réaliser cette vision économique forestière, nous avons besoin de moderniser notre loi sur les terres et forêts de la Couronne. Voilà encore une possibilité de terrain d'entente. Another big opportunity to energize the farming and food sectors of our economy is in becoming more self-sufficient in food. This is not a Throne speech commitment either, Madam Speaker, but surely this represents common ground. And certainly knowing the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, I'm confident that it does. The focus of the Throne speech on the important role small businesses play in economic development represents common ground as well, Madam Speaker. I agree, when it comes to job creation, we need to stop hunting and start gardening, as the Throne speech says. However, Madam Speaker, how we garden and what we grow in those gardens matters a lot. Do we garden using as little energy and as few material resources as possible? Do we garden in ways that reduce our carbon footprint or that are carbon neutral? Do we garden in ways that cause as little damage to the ecosystem as possible? Or do we ignore those concerns to avoid regulating the gardeners? That's the question, Madam Speaker. Do we garden in ways that retains the profits locally, Madam Speaker, creating wealth in the community? Or do we garden in ways that allows profits to be shipped offshore, Madam Speaker, or to other parts of this country, or to the United States, Madam Speaker? Draining wealth out of our communities rather than building wealth in our communities. Do we garden in ways that offer people meaningful employment and the opportunity to fully participate in society? Or do we garden in ways that actually minimizes the need for labor, Madam Speaker? That's an important question. We put forward a bold proposal during the election to increase local food production, to increase local production of green goods and services like food and renewable energy, to replace 10% of what we currently import. Government procurement would be useful and be used to prime that pump. Loan guarantees and payroll rebates previously provided to large profitable corporations would be redirected to local enterprises participating in that import substitution strategy. This would keep profits local. This would generate community wealth. This would create 14,000 jobs for New Brunswickers and inject $1.8 billion into our economy annually, building a truly green economy and providing truly green jobs for people. Is there common ground here? Well, we'll see. There's certainly common ground in open government and in giving local governments more authority so their citizens can democratically shape the future of their communities, as the throne speech commits. When it comes to fiscal management, there may be common ground. We'll see. Too much of our tax revenue is never collected because too many large corporations have found legal means to avoid paying their fair share of taxes in New Brunswick. Our healthcare and education systems are losing out as a result, and individual New Brunswickers end up paying a disproportionate amount for these public services as a result. Is there common ground there? Well, we'll see. In other cases, government itself has decided to afford massive tax breaks to, for example, industrial properties, removing revenue that could improve health and educational outcomes for New Brunswickers. And once again, individual New Brunswickers end up paying a disproportionate amount for these public services. The same problem actually extends to the way we charge for royalties on timber and minerals. Their exploitation is failing to generate the wealth it should for New Brunswick, in the name of minimizing costs to the corporations who profit from the natural resources found in New Brunswick. So, is there common ground? How do we start? Well, one way to start would be for the Premier to ensure that the income tax expenditures of private corporations are publicly reported. Now, some may think that's an invasion of privacy, but no, ma'am. Madam Speaker, the income tax expenditures of publicly traded corporations are publicly reported in their annual reports every year. So all we should be asking for is that private corporations in New Brunswick be treated exactly the same way, so the New Brunswickers will know what private corporations in New Brunswick are paying in terms of their taxes. In a similar vein, the Premier could ensure that the Department of Finance publishes a tax expenditure account to track losses in provincial revenues associated with tax breaks, deferrals, and credits in the New Brunswick tax system. So that, to me, feels like open government, Madam Speaker, and that, to me, feels like the first step towards providing the information necessary to ensure everyone pays their fair share in addressing our fiscal situation. What about electoral reform, Madam Speaker? Well, it's absent from the throne speech, and that's a concern, but it is interesting that it was a progressive Conservative Premier Bernard Lord, whose 2003 Commission on Legislative Democracy that recommended New Brunswick adopt mixed-member proportional representation. So the question is, will the Premier pursue this? Well, it's not in the throne speech, but he's talking about lots of things that aren't in the throne speech, so maybe he could talk about that. What about the promised referendum on lowering the voting age to 16? Will the Premier pursue this? There'd be plenty of ground on electoral reform in both of these cases. If it's something the Premier and Cabinet and minority government were interested in pursuing. To ensure a stable minority government that can operate across multiple years, it is indeed the Premier and his Cabinet's responsibility to find the common ground upon which we all can work that reflects the greatest needs of our times. Over the past 4 years, I've gotten to know a few of the members who are now Cabinet Ministers pretty well. And I'm confident in them, Madam Speaker, and I look forward to working with them. The new members who have been appointed to Cabinet appear to have great potential. I look forward to working with them as well, Madam Speaker. I hope that this government truly becomes a Cabinet government in the spirit of Cabinet governments of the past, where there is broad cooperation among the members to work on the important issues of the day. We just have had top-down government for too many decades, and this minority government has the opportunity to change that. We need to make this minority legislature a success, and that means focusing our efforts on the common ground we share to serve the common good. This necessarily means avoiding initiatives that are driven by corporate interests to primarily serve their self-interest. A throne speech is supposed to outline the agenda of the government for the session, but much of what the Premier has been speaking about repeatedly in the media as his priorities do not appear in the throne speech, Madam Speaker, notably expanding the production of shale gas in the Frederick Brook shale play, and in creating a government-owned holding company to seek approvals for a pipeline to transport bitumen to the Irving Oil Marine facility. This leaves one with the dilemma of whether to vote on the substance of the throne speech, which is supposed to lay out the agenda of the government in this session, or vote on the broader agenda the Premier keeps presenting in the media, Madam Speaker. If he would claim the common ground, which is extensive, as I've outlined in my remarks here, Madam Speaker, extensive. If the Premier and his Cabinet and his minority government would claim the common ground, rather than planting his flag on vigorously disputed ground, the way forward would be much, much clearer. Liwan, Nasi, thank you very much, Madam Speaker.